In this video, I'm going to cover some key service items on my E63, such as engine mounts and valve cover gaskets. The minor issue that I noticed is that I have oil weeping from the back of the driver's side valve cover. So to start, I removed the engine cover, intake snorkels, and air filter boxes. This is a good time to give the area around the valve cover a quick vacuum. Then I removed all of the T25 coil packs. Upon further inspection, there is oil in the spark plug chamber coming from the seal on the valve cover, and it's filling the chamber with oil. This is on the passenger side at the back. The rubber boot of the coil was completely soaked in oil. We'll have to clean this and then replace the boot later on. Next, I removed the T30 harness bracket and moved the harness away by pulling the two clips off of the valve cover. The driver's side has one extra screw at the back to remove, but otherwise it's quite similar. It's a good time to vacuum again in case there was anything under the harness. And then I removed all of the bolts and removed the valve cover. And there it is, the seal for the spark plugs hole wasn't even seated in the cover and just fell out. And it even looks squished and twisted. Anyways, now that we can see the valve train, this is a great time to inspect it. Starting on the passenger side, intake cams look really good. We're looking for any roughness or wear or flattening of the cam lobes, but this looks really good and has a very smooth surface. Now onto the exhaust cams. They are less likely to wear and look to be in excellent condition. They feel completely smooth to the touch, which is great. Under them are the lifters or bucket tappets, and they look good as well. While we are here, I can show the new headbolts. Since this engine is built after engine number 60658, it has the new headbolts. My engine number is 66923. You can use a site like lastvin.com to check your engine number using your VIN. Otherwise, you can tell the new versus old if you have the valve covers off. The new bolts use an e-Torx socket instead of a Torx bit of the old bolts. Even though the failures are extremely rare with the old style bolts, the new ones are stronger. Moving to the driver's side, intake cam looks good with a nice smooth surface on the lobes. Exhaust cam looks good as well. But this car is really too low of a mileage to have any issues. It still has less than 50,000 miles. The condition of the engine generally is nice. There isn't that brown staining that would come from running old oil for a long time. So anyways, back to the valve cover install. You want to inspect for cracks anywhere on the valve cover because it is a plastic valve cover. And then fit the gasket very carefully after cleaning the gasket channel. And I also, of course, replaced the gaskets for the spark plug holes. Before bringing in the valve cover, I made sure the wiring harness is tucked below the edge of the cylinder head, and then I'll bring it back up after the valve cover is seated. I put back all of the bolts so they are just finger tight and began to torque the cover down to 8.5 Newton meters. The manual lists a torque pattern that should be used, which starts from the middle and works its way out to the front and back of the valve cover. Once the valve cover is torqued, you move back the harness, the clips, and bolt back the brackets at the front. Now that the valve cover is done, I move to change the spark plugs. With a light stream of compressed air and a quick vacuum, I made sure the ports were clean, and then I also sucked out the oil from that one cylinder. just to make sure none of that stuff goes inside the engine. So, removing the first spark plug, this one being in fine shape with some minor deposits. Most of the other ones were exactly the same. And the spark plugs are torqued down to 22 Newton meters. One of the boots on the coil packs, the one that was oily actually, had a tear in the rubber, so I just went ahead and replaced it. With all of the coil packs back in, they are gently torqued to 6 Newton meters. And after that, I just assembled the engine back together with the air boxes, the covers, and the intake pipes. So now moving on to the engine mounts. The classic test is to hold the brakes and give the car a bit of gas. You should only see limited movement. But here, we see the driver's side lifting way too much, so the mounts need replacing. I started by disconnecting the battery. Then I lifted the car in the air, and upon a quick inspection, we can see how the mount has been contacting the frame and how the rubber shield is starting to fall apart. And that's your last line of defense between metal on metal contact. So to get to the mounts, we need to remove the exhaust, which includes unplugging all of the sensors and removing the 2 center 13mm bolts. We have to remove the 2 E12 clamps before the resonator, as well as this T50 brace. Then we loosen all the E12 clamps at the manifold, and the exhaust is free to set aside. The next step was to loosen the 16mm top bolt of the mount from below. You can get a specific Mercedes tool, but I searched through the toolbox and I found a good solution. It is a 5/8 wrench, so that's equal to 15.9mm, so it's a good fit. And on the other end, it's a 9/16, which fits a 1/2-inch drive socket right into it. So with that extra leverage, you can get the bolt loose. Now you can raise the engine carefully, and if you're raising from the bottom, you'll need to use a large wooden block that spreads the weight on the pan. Once the weight is raised off of the mounts, I remove the bottom bolts with a 13mm socket, and the mounts are now out. And comparing the old driver's side mount to the new one, the main differences are how easy it is to move the old mount, and the height difference. Again, comparing the new to the old for the passenger side, the height difference is significant. So I brought the new mounts into the car and lowered the engine back down most of the way, as well as starting the top bolts before putting the full weight down. And then I used the same tool as before to get 50 Newton meters of torque on the top bolt. And then the bottom bolts were 28 Newton meters. Now I can easily get my hand above the stabilizer bar with lots of extra room, while before I could not. Now moving on to the transmission mount, so we loosen the 13mm bolts underneath the brace, and like the engine, we lift on the pan with the weight distributed evenly on a block. Then I remove the 6 16mm bolts for the brace, and then the 2 on the back of the mount. Comparing the new one, we can see how the old one has sagged down. We can also see that the part number was updated and the new design is better, with rubber support at the bottom, whereas the old one had only supports on the sides. So a nice improvement. Back in the car, the 2 bolts for the mount are torqued to 50 Newton meters. The brace is then torqued to 70 Newton meters, and then we lower the transmission, and the 3 bolts for the mount to the brace are 28 Newton meters. Now it's time to bring the exhaust into the car. All of the wires are brought into place, and then everything is settled hand tight. We torqued the front manifold clamps to 20 Newton meters, and then the center mounts are torqued again to 20 Newton meters. And then the clamps before the resonator are torqued to 35 Newton meters. And finally, that T50 brace is torqued to 60 Newton meters. And job done. So is the E63 a money pit? I still think not, but I've definitely spent a bit of money and time on this car already. Any car that is more than 10 years old is going to need some repairs. I already did some of the basics like engine oil, transmission fluid, and we've just wrapped up the engine mounts, spark plugs, and valve covers. And on the first start with the new mounts, you can really tell that the car is a lot smoother and just improves the overall driving experience. It feels like a new car. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, take a look at my store. Link is in the description. If you want to see more Mercedes and AMG content, subscribe for more videos like this one.